What's going on, boxing fans? Julian Williams here at the distance. Got a video for you guys today. Been away for a while, but there's something that I've noticed recently, and I'm just gonna state this in the video. And this video is always, I guess, it's kind of been done, but I'm just gonna give my take on it. You know, I don't remember who did it. Don't know, don't really care. But anyway, I'm just gonna give my opinion. And this is about the lack of depth and lack of coverage in boxing. Not necessarily a lack of depth within fighters, but lack of depth within fights. As you guys noticed, maybe in the last couple of years, websites such as Yahoo.com, MSNBC, and ESPN have kind of showed in the last couple of years kind of a smaller amounts of coverage in the sport. See, after the Mayweather De La Hoya fight back in '07, I started to I started to see the sport. I saw coverage kind of progress afterward because people were interested in who Mayweather would fight next or whatever. And other than who Mayweather would fight next, all these good fights were happening that year of 2007. And to me, it did end a little bit depressing. But you know, there was just a lot of people were intrigued by boxing, especially the welterweight division, and so much money in that division, and so much talent and people coming up. And other than that, you know, Vladimir Klitschko was you know, at the beginning of his, wasn't at the very beginning, was pretty much starting his reign of dominance in heavyweight division. And he was about to unify with Sultan Ibragimov, and they unified in February '07. He unified in February 2008, and it just seemed that boxing was starting to be on the comeback trail. And then, you know, Mayweather retired and stuff, and it seemed to me that when he retired, that coverage of boxing started to regress a little bit. But at the same time, right after he retired, we had Cotto Margarito, and that was, you know, one of my favorite fights in 2008 to watch. And you know, a lot of people were saying, "Hey, we don't need Mayweather, whatever." And honestly, you know, my opinion, I don't think that boxing needs anybody, to be honest, because we're always going to have boxing, and you know, there's always going to be fights. But I've noticed this. There are fights every day, practically. Even on holidays, there are fights every day in boxing. Whether it be professional or amateur ranks, or whether it be street fighting, whatever, though it doesn't really count. But there are boxing matches practically every day. And can the media cover every single boxing match? Hell no. But there are fights out there that the media and the mainstream are not covering that I think should be covered. There are plenty of good fights out there that I highly doubt will be covered by the mainstream audience. Primarily fights in Europe, primarily also fighters on the comeback trail, and stuff like that. And sometimes ESPN showcases it. Sometimes Showtime showcases it, or if HBO didn't invest, if HBO invested money in you, then they'll showcase your comeback. But if nobody is investing any money in you, then there's going to be a lack of media coverage, and only the hardcore fans are going to be the ones interested in some of these fights. And me personally, I'm a huge fan. I don't care where you're from. You know, I'm gonna be a fan of boxing, you know, for pretty much the rest of my life. And I have a long life, you know, ahead of me, I believe. And me, I'd like to see more coverage within the sport of boxing. That's why I cover so many different fights. That's why I talk about fights that are in, you know, Europe or Japan or wherever. You know, I talk about primarily, you know, any fight that I can call and predict. I try to call every single fight that I can. But doesn't it bother you with the lack of media coverage? I do believe that boxing should be on that same level as basketball, football, baseball, hockey, and even soccer. I think that boxing should be on that same level as far as coverage goes, because in boxing there's no off season. There's always fights going on. It's a continuous thing. There's no seasons in boxing. Fighters get in the ring 2-3 times a year, and do their work. Sit around a couple months, get back in the ring, accept the next fight, and that's something that I've never gotten was how these men sometimes kill themselves to get in the ring and fight, but the mainstream media doesn't pay attention to that, and some see it as barbaric instead of as an art. And a lot of people who are non-boxing fans get into this Pacquiao Mayweather thing, and so many people, including myself, want to see this fight happen. And I've always questioned what direction will boxing go when this fight happens, after this fight happens, and say Pacquiao beats Mayweather or Mayweather beats Pacquiao, and it's all done. It's all said and done. It's the big spectacle in the sport. What happens after that fight? It's a very, I guess, eerie thought of what could possibly happen. When this fight is over, could boxing become bigger, or will boxing's coverage just dwindle? And that's what it seems like all the media and all the people are interested in, is Pacquiao Mayweather. And so many people are talking about it. Me, it's a fight in my eyes that I believe needs to happen to bring more fans to the sport. But in general, does the fight actually need to happen just to happen? In my opinion, is this: boxing was around before Mayweather Pacquiao, and it will be around after Mayweather Pacquiao. Whether the fight happens or not, boxing will still be here. And there's a lot of people that don't primarily understand that. Like, some people are saying, "Oh, I'll stop watching boxing if Pacquiao beats Mayweather or Mayweather beats Pacquiao. I'll stop watching the sport." This, that, and the other. And those aren't true fans of the sport, if you ask me. It's just like being a fan of the Lakers or the Celtics or the Mavericks or the Cavaliers, and they never won a championship anywhere, but the latter two. And you're a fan when they're winning, but when they're losing, you really just don't give a fuck about them. You find a new team. That's what seems to me we have a lot of in the sport of boxing. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with it, but if you're a fan of somebody, and me, I'm a fan of fighters, but at the same time, I'm a fan of the sport. And me personally, I would love to see more coverage in the sport. I'm not gonna, just because my favorite fighter loses, I'm not gonna turn around and say, okay, well, I'm never watching sport again, because that's kind of unfair to the sport. Especially because these guys bust their asses to get in the ring and perform. And I think that the media needs to pay more attention to that and pay attention to the art form instead of looking at it as barbaric or whatever. And there's another word I'm thinking about, but I'm not saying it right now. But I just think that the media needs to pay more attention to boxing, in general, because the news has regressed quite a bit since probably '05. But anyway, so much I want to say, but I'm about to get off here. But anyway, that was The Distance. Thanks for watching. Peace.